Sweyn Forkbeard, the Viking king who conquered England. More than a century had passed since the attack on the monastery at Lindisfarne. The early raiders sought gold, silver, and easy riches. Now, a new generation of Scandinavian leaders harbored far greater ambitions. In Denmark, an ambitious king was consolidating his power over various local chieftains. His name was Sweyn Forkbeard, the son of Harold Bluetooth. He inherited not only an expanding kingdom, but also a powerful naval tradition built up over decades. Under his command, Denmark became a military and commercial powerhouse. Shipyards worked ceaselessly. New longships were built in large numbers, while seasoned warriors were mustered for increasingly massive expeditions. Unlike the early Vikings, who often sailed in small, independent groups, Sweyn planned campaigns orchestrated by a centralized government. His goal was not merely to launch quick raids and return home. He sought to conquer kingdoms. Meanwhile, England was enjoying a period of relative stability. Alfred's successors, particularly Edward the Elder and his grandson Athelstan, had managed to reclaim much of the former Danelaw and strengthen the authority of the English crown. For a few decades, it seemed the Viking threat had receded, but this calm would prove fleeting. By the late 10th century, England was once again a wealthy land. Its monasteries amassed treasures, its towns flourished, and its agriculture produced surpluses capable of sustaining a growing population. This wealth once again attracted Scandinavian rulers. Between 980 and 990, new fleets began crossing the North Sea. This time, however, the attacks were on a much larger scale. Hundreds of ships appeared simultaneously along various stretches of the English coast. Coastal populations barely had time to react. Monasteries were looted, ports were set ablaze, entire villages vanished before the advancing invaders. The English king at the time, Æthelred II, had inherited a powerful kingdom but struggled greatly to organize its defense. Unlike Alfred, who had thoroughly reformed the army and the defensive system, Æthelred showed hesitation in the face of crises. On several occasions, he chose to negotiate with the invaders. To avert further attacks, he began paying vast sums of silver to the Vikings. This tribute became known as Danegeld. At first, the strategy seemed to work. After receiving payment, some fleets did indeed leave England, but news spread quickly across Scandinavia. Viking kings realized that England possessed virtually inexhaustible wealth. A mere threat of further invasion was enough to secure shipments of silver. Danegeld became an incentive for even larger attacks. With each payment, more warriors were drawn to England, more ships crossed the sea, more commanders dreamed of tapping into that seemingly endless source of wealth. Meanwhile, Sweyn watched every event closely. He saw that the English kingdom possessed a large army but was politically divided. The nobility often disagreed with the king's decisions. Some regions acted almost independently. It was precisely the kind of weakness an experienced conqueror knew how to exploit. In the years that followed, Sweyn would begin assembling the largest fleet Denmark had sent against England since the days of the Great Heathen Army. But his goal went far beyond mere plunder. He desired something few Vikings before him had dared to imagine: the English crown. In the next chapter, we will follow Sweyn's initial campaigns on English soil, the deepening crisis of Æthelred II's reign, and the events that would transform a series of invasions into a full-scale conquest of England. As the 11th century approached, the situation in England became increasingly unstable. Viking raids continued year after year. Even as one fleet left the English coast laden with silver, another would appear shortly thereafter. The massive Danegeld payments had not bought peace. They had merely whetted the Scandinavians' appetite for the island's riches. Meanwhile, King Æthelred II saw his authority wane. The population was beginning to lose faith in the monarch's ability to protect the realm. The nobility was divided. Some advocated strengthening the army. Others believed that continuing to pay tribute was the only way to avert a devastating war. Amidst this political division, a sense of fear spread. Rumors circulated through English towns. It was said that many Scandinavians living in the Danelaw maintained contact with invaders from Denmark. Some believed these settlers might open city gates or provide strategic intelligence during future invasions. There is no evidence of an organized conspiracy, but to Æthelred, the mere possibility seemed sufficient to justify an extreme measure. on November 13, 1002, a date known in the Christian calendar as Saint Brice's Day. The king made a decision that would fundamentally alter the course of English history. He ordered the killing of Danes residing in territories under his control. The order primarily targeted Scandinavian communities scattered across southern England. In some towns, armed groups stormed into homes. Entire families were attacked. Men, women, and children lost their lives. Chronicles describe scenes of horrific violence. Although the exact number of victims remains unknown, archaeologists have found evidence of mass executions in places like Oxford, where skeletons show clear signs of violent deaths from that period. The event became known as the St. Brice's Day Massacre. For centuries, historians have debated its scope. Some believe the attack was limited to certain regions. Others argue that it affected a far greater number of communities. Regardless of the scale, the consequences were profound. Among the dead, according to ancient medieval traditions, was Gunhilda, a woman of Danish origin linked to the Danish royal family. While some details of this story remain a subject of scholarly debate, medieval sources state that she was the sister of King Sweyn Forkbeard. If this indeed happened, the massacre ceased to be merely a political matter. It became something deeply personal. News spread rapidly across the North Sea. Merchants, sailors, survivors. Everyone carried accounts of what had transpired in England. For many Scandinavians, those deaths represented an unforgivable betrayal. For decades, thousands of families had settled peacefully on English soil. Now, many of them had been slaughtered on the king's own orders. Sweyn was quick to react. The massacre provided exactly the justification he needed to further unite the Scandinavian chieftains under his leadership. The war was no longer just a quest for riches. It was now framed as a campaign of vengeance and justice. New warriors answered the call. Blacksmiths worked day and night forging swords, spears, and axes. Shipbuilders expanded the shipyards. Entire forests were felled to construct dozens of new longships. Denmark was preparing its largest military expedition. Meanwhile, Æthelred believed he would still be able to contain the threat. He ordered the reinforcement of some coastal strongholds. He attempted to reorganize the army. He also continued to collect taxes to fund further Danegeld payments, but the situation was becoming increasingly difficult. The constant levies weighed heavily on the population. Peasants paid higher taxes. Merchants faced hardships. Discontent grew in virtually every region of the kingdom. At the same time, England's military reputation suffered a severe blow. The Vikings realized that the king preferred to negotiate rather than confront their armies directly. This encouraged further expeditions. Each successful attack demonstrated that English resistance was weakening. In 2003, Sweyn launched his campaign of reprisal. His initial raid struck southwestern England. Coastal towns were plundered. Monasteries were once again set ablaze. Every summer, new fleets crossed the North Sea. Instead of launching a single invasion, Sweyn adopted a strategy of attrition. Year after year, his men attacked different regions. They destroyed crops. They seized livestock. They disrupted trade. They forced the English crown to spend vast resources on defense. The economy was beginning to feel the effects of the ongoing war. Some communities never fully recovered from the attacks. Even so, Sweyn was still waiting for the ideal moment. His true goal was not to destroy England. It was to rule it. He understood that conquering a kingdom required far more than winning battles. It was necessary to slowly undermine the king's authority until much of the nobility withdrew their support. And that is precisely what was beginning to happen. Various local leaders began to question Æthelred's decisions. Some believed the king had lost the ability to protect his people. Others advocated for profound changes in the kingdom's leadership. Without realizing it, England itself was beginning to open the way for a foreign conqueror. Meanwhile, in Denmark, a young prince was closely watching all these campaigns. His name was Cnut. Filho de Sweyn Barba Bifurcada, ele acompanhava o crescimento do poder dinamarquês e aprendia as estratégias que, poucos anos depois, permitiriam construir um dos maiores impérios da Europa medieval. A grande invasão definitiva estava cada vez mais próxima. E, quando ela começasse, a história da Inglaterra mudaria para sempre. At the beginning of the 11th century, England was exhausted. More than 30 years of invasions, tribute payments, and internal strife had deeply weakened the kingdom. Wealth accumulated over generations had been consumed by successive Danegeld payments, while public confidence in Æthelred II waned with every new defeat. Across the North Sea, however, the situation was vastly different. Denmark had never been stronger. Under the command of Sweyn Forkbeard, the country boasted one of Europe's largest fleets. Its warriors were veterans of countless campaigns, and Sweyn's authority over Scandinavian chieftains enabled him to organize expeditions far more coordinated than those of earlier invaders. Sweyn believed the decisive moment had arrived. In 1013, he assembled a massive fleet and crossed the North Sea. But this time, he did not intend merely to plunder monasteries or exact tribute. His goal was the definitive conquest of England. The first coastal towns fell quickly. The experience the Vikings had gained over more than 2 centuries of campaigning made their attacks
the land
highly
of gold is within our
Fortifications
reach!
were besieged, ports were occupied. Key trade routes fell under Scandinavian control. Upon realizing the scale of the invasion, several English nobles made a surprising decision. Instead of organizing resistance, they chose to negotiate. Many no longer believed Æthelred capable of saving the kingdom. Some opened their city gates. Others swore allegiance to the Danish king. Little by little, English authority crumbled. In the north, important regions acknowledged Sweyn as their ruler. Other towns soon followed suit. The Viking advance continued virtually unchecked. When London remained as one of the last major centers of resistance, Sweyn laid siege to the city and waited. Although London managed to hold out for a time thanks to its walls and the determination of its inhabitants, the rest of the kingdom had already changed sides. Æthelred realized he was no longer in a position to continue ruling. Lacking sufficient support among the nobility, he made a dramatic decision. He fled to Normandy. There, he found refuge with the family of his wife, Emma of Normandy. For the first time since the days of Alfred, an English king was abandoning his own kingdom in the face of a foreign conqueror. Without significant opposition, Sweyn Forkbeard was recognized as King of England. It was an extraordinary event. The man who, decades earlier, had led expeditions across the North Sea was now ruling one of Europe's wealthiest kingdoms. The dream that had seemed impossible to the early Vikings had finally been realized. England had a Scandinavian king, but history held an unexpected twist in store. Just weeks after ascending the throne in February 1014, Sweyn died suddenly. Medieval sources do not agree on the exact cause of his death. Some mention a sudden illness. Others speak of health issues exacerbated by age and military campaigns. Regardless of the cause, his death plunged the kingdom into a new crisis. The Danish warriors immediately proclaimed his son Cnut as his successor. However, many English nobles saw this moment as an opportunity to restore the old dynasty. Messengers were sent to Normandy. Æthelred received an invitation to return to England, accepting certain conditions imposed by the nobles, among them a promise to rule more justly and listen to his advisors. The former king returned to the country. Cnut realized he did not yet have sufficient strength to maintain control on his own. He withdrew some of his troops to Denmark, but he did not view this as a defeat. It was merely a strategic retreat. During this period, he consolidated his position in his home kingdom, gathered new allies, and prepared a much larger expedition. Meanwhile, in England, the situation remained unstable. Æthelred's return did not solve the kingdom's problems. Trust between the king and his nobles remained shaken. Political disputes were intensifying. Financial resources were practically exhausted. When Æthelred died in 1016, his son Edmund Ironside took command of the English resistance. Brave and determined, Edmund tried to reorganize the army and halt the Danish advance. But Cnut was already prepared. He returned to England leading a powerful fleet and an army even larger than his father's. The struggle for the English throne was entering its decisive phase. Unlike Sweyn, Cnut did not seek merely to conquer. He intended to build an enduring empire. His vision was far more ambitious. He dreamed of uniting the great kingdoms of Northern Europe under a single crown: England, Denmark, Norway, and later part of Sweden. Thus began the project for the greatest empire ever ruled by a Viking king. Sweyn Forkbeard's legacy had completely transformed England's destiny. He demonstrated that Scandinavians could do far more than raid and plunder. They could rule, administer, collect taxes, build political alliances, and occupy the throne of one of Europe's most important kingdoms. But his son would take this idea to a level never before imagined. In the next chapter, we will meet Cnut the Great, the man who united different peoples under a single empire, ruled over millions, and became one of the most powerful sovereigns of the entire Middle Ages. With him, the Viking Age would reach its zenith, and also begin its slow march toward its end.
I will lead you to victory.
Hail Cnut! Lead us to victory! Hail our leader!
Three kingdoms, one empire.
Pull hard! The land of gold is within our reach!